Come, Holy Spirit, come now, come as you wish. Come, Holy Spirit, come now, come as you wish. Come, Holy Spirit, come now, come as you wish. We have plenty of so-called private revelations, writings of the saints who were just sharing their wisdom or even some communication with the Blessed Trinity. One of them, Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich, the one which Mel Gibson was using for making this beautiful movie Passion, she was recording what Jesus was complaining about. It's quite surprise complaint that we do not look enough to heaven, that we do not look with curiosity what is the life after life. And one of his arguments was, don't you think I have received them specially well, Martha, Mary, Lazarus, who received me here, I received them well in my kingdom? One of the things which always helps to make a bit further horizon, to look to our goal. And this passage of Martha and Mary, it's not by chance in this place where we have it now. Majority of the scriptures not only inspire, but put in some kind reasonable following. And when it's written there, it has a meaning. If you remember, last Sunday we had this parable of the Good Samaritan, and immediately after this parable of the Good Samaritan, there is a house of Martha and Mary, like extreme difficult situation and everyday situation. And the person who comes and needs to be ministered to is Jesus himself. So this is also invitation to us to be aware. And in some way, you can say that Luke is saying to all generations of Christians, be aware of who the neighbor is, who might be just at hand. And it might be the Lord himself who is knocking at your door. So the person you receive at the table might be the angel or might be the Lord, as we just heard in the first reading of today when Abraham was receiving these three angels. Moreover, Martha, do not be aware of too many things. Why? Because you might miss who is really here, who is in your presence or in whose presence you are. Mary was the one who was aware of this Lord's presence, and she was protected by the Lord because this is what is required. We need Jesus, we need his grace, and we need to mix with him, enter into the relationship, and this, what is rooted in him, it cannot be taken away from us. In Martha and Mary together, they become great models and symbols of all disciples who do serve in love. Don't oppose them. It is just for our instruction that there are different vocations, and the motivation beyond our action is the most important. They find that the person whom they are serving is the Lord himself, and they dedicated the rest of their life to the service of his church. At the end of this gospel, written by Luke, the last chapter, the two men were on the road to Emmaus, and they found that the traveler who joined them, who was with them, was the risen Lord. So just see the pattern, how Luke is making us aware whom are we serving, that we don't forget it. Out of this, how to treat ourselves, there are three moral questions. The whole moral theology you can put in these three questions. I recommend you this tiny book. It looks like a prayer book, The Philosophy of Jesus by Professor Peter Kreeft. That's only for those who like to think. If you cannot afford thinking, it demands thinking, and you have to read some pages more than once to get everything what is there. And he put it in very simple way there. How should we relate to each other? The second question is, how should we relate to ourselves? And the third, how should we relate to God? He reminded in this book, this is what C.S. Lewis was writing, categorizing these things. How should my ship cooperate with the other ships in the fleet? How should it stay ship's shape itself? And also, what is the fleet's mission? So it's like the same question from different perspective, and you can also take it from this angle: the question of social morality, the question of individual morality and the question of the meaning of life. It's a very important question, and we have to have an answer and refresh us very much. Because many times what you see what is happening in the world, all this violence, that's what is world without God. There is no goal, there is no hope, there is no motivation. And the third question about the meaning of life is the most important, because the answer to it makes a difference to the answer to all other questions. And it's the question of the ultimate end of everything else. And this has motivation, whatever we do in our lives, whatever you are somehow even trapped in our life, that we'll understand there's one road of salvation and we have to be heading the right direction. Though the end does not justify the means, that is, a good end does not justify an evil means. Just to give you a simple example, I'm so sympathetic to the all poor people and I would like to support them, but first let me rob the bank to have the money. It doesn't work like this. The means and the goal must be good. In the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius of Loyola, he even develops more in 3 places. The first is the intention, so the intention must be good, the means must be good, and the goal, the end, must be good. If one of them is evil, everything is wrong. So, yet a good end does justify a good means. Why? For the means are relative to the end. The means are good, and the end is good. So, looking at this moral teaching, so what is Jesus' answer to these urgent questions? What is Jesus' answer to the question of the meaning of life? What is his answer to the question of ultimate end and the greatest good? And if you read correctly the Gospels, you will find somehow astonishing simple how simple is the answer. The answer is Christ himself. The Christ is the greatest good. As someone was approaching Jesus, calling him good master, and Jesus didn't say that I'm not good. He pointed, God is only good. If you want to measure your goodness, measure it against God's goodness. And Christ is the greatest good, or as it was explained from the early Christianity, he's this treasure hidden in the ground. When somebody is finding this treasure, all other things are not important in comparison with this, what you have found. So how then should we live? And it's very simple answer, as Christ, imitating him. What sort of people should we be? Christs, or some people would say like little Christs in the world. And we must grow, as St. Paul is encouraging Ephesians, grow into the full measure of the stature of Christ. So we are work in progress. It's not something what is done. We should grow. We should eliminate the things which do not belong to God and develop the things which are straight from him. How should we treat each other? As Christ. If we remember that we are serving God, if we remember, or Jesus identifies himself with our neighbor, it should change all our perspective, all the meaning of our service. As Jesus said, truly, truly, I say to you, whatever you do to one of this list of my brethren, you do to me. And that's why it's so important. Christ is everything, and he brings the motivation, or we have no motivation at all. Instead of telling us the answer, Christ shows us the answer. For he is the answer. He shows us himself. Just look at me, follow me, my teaching, imitate my moral example, and everything will be fine with your life. St. Paul teaches this scandalously simple idea of a good life as simply Christ. For me, to live is Christ. As simple as that, as he wrote in the letter to the Philippians. And therefore, he goes on to say next that to die is gain. For if life is Christ, then death is only more Christ, because you are closer to him. It's not less, it's more. So Jesus is more than one who taught goodness and lived goodness and demanded goodness. The answer is quite simple. He is goodness. And this is what is our desire. Nothing and nobody in this life can satisfy you completely. God planted in us some kind of device that runs on Him. You can be amazed with the beauty of the beach, but then after some time you ask, is that all? And the question is that we don't want just beauty of the beach or any other beauty. We want the beauty itself. We want the goodness in self. We want God. This is how we're programmed, how it's our desire directed. So He's not just the best teacher of the meaning of life. Jesus is the meaning of life. And that's especially as Christians we have to remind ourselves daily. See the difference. Buddha says, look not to me, look to my teaching. Jesus said, come unto me. To the people who are saying that all religions are equal, they don't know what they are saying. They don't know any religion. Because even simple study of it, you will find so quickly the difference. Buddha never said, imitate me. Buddha said, I found the way. That's the way, follow it. Jesus said, I am the way. Buddha, he never said, I will die for you to bring you to eternal salvation. Jesus said, I will die and my death will open the gates to the eternity. No one was even claiming anything even close to this, what Jesus was teaching. So that's why He's so unique. And when Jesus said to Martha, there is only one thing needed, there is only one way of salvation for all. That's what's new, this new man, God-man, who brought not only the revelation from the other side, but who brought the heart of God, who revealed the heart of God from inside. With all this help, the map of moral principles, how should we relate to each other, to ourselves, to God, is so clear that even an idiot can read it. It's not easy to put in practice, but to understand is quite obvious, quite reasonable. So we need to see the oneness of all of them, and we see that when we see Jesus. I remember on the beginning of the pontificate of John Paul, how he was inviting, crying to the whole world, you cannot understand yourself a part of Jesus or against Him. There is no opening. This is what George MacDonald was writing, golden key. Jesus is this golden key which opens the mysteries, which makes something, it makes sense. It brings us to the good terms with ourselves, with others, and with God. So we see that there is only one thing needful, and that is Him, as Mary was sitting and listening and loving at His feet. So we do not need Jesus but we need just Jesus only. Just if you would have some kind of experience, because it's very precious not to have it, but also to know about it, because it's great motivation. If you got some kind of awakening in the spiritual life, in invitation to make more dedicated life to God and to the others, suddenly when you discover this, you don't need all these other things which you thought you need. Jesus only is sufficient. In Him are all goods, all gifts, absolutely everything we need. And that's teaching of Paul to Philippians. If you have everything, how can you miss anything else? For when we know Him, we learn that we do not really need many of the little good things we thought we needed. It's quite common experience. Any culture, any background may be differently expressed, but exactly in the same direction. So this Mary thing is simply sitting at His feet and listening and loving. So He's really all we need. Some people would ask something like this, what besides Him? What's besides Christ? Do we need anything? The only other thing we need to know is that besides Christ, there is no other thing we need to know. It's as simple as that. what Jesus is saying to us, his friends, those who follow him, those who want to share life with him. Jesus asked his friends to try to live in such a way that if the Lord comes to you now, you are ready to go and fulfill his will. He's asking for readiness to seek God and follow him. And sometimes could be as extreme as we heard last Sunday about help to this wounded man, like the Good Samaritan did, and sometimes could be something very simple from the daily routine, very monotone duty which you might even not like. And this is what I wanted to give you, something for a practical use. Brother Lawrence of the Resurrection, the French Carmelite, he wrote this: "It is enough for me to pick up but a straw from the ground for the love of God." I don't know if you ever tried it. I tried it already a few years ago when I was frustrated with this garbage which the people throw out of their cars, And then instead of being angry or something like this, okay, pick it up out of love to God, to honor God. See what is happening in your heart. I would really recommend take something what is your duty, which you don't like. Somebody has to do it, okay, let me do it, and apply to this principle. Do it out of love to God. And don't forget to look at your heart. There will be changes. He wrote this beautiful prescription for pleasing God and growing the Spirit. It is not quicker, not easier, just to do our common business wholly for the love of Him. So you don't need extra hour of the day to commend it to God. You don't need extra activity just specially for Him. Whatever is your duty, whatever you are trapped by life, do it out of love to God. If someone dragged you to the church, you can start now, out of love to Him sitting in the pew. Beautiful spiritual exercise. So this is what Jesus is saying to us. In the service which you give to each other, you're actually serving me. If only your eyes were opened. And the key, in a very simple way, very easy to remember and relatively easy to apply. It's not easy to persevere, but it's easy to apply. Try it. This golden key which opens out of love to God. And observe your heart, because whatever you find there, it will be very powerful motivation.